Thank you very much คุณอรนุช เลิศสุวรรณกิจ Co-founder and CEO of TechSource Media สวัสดีค่ะ Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome all of you to TechSource Global Summit 2022, Opportunities Made Possible. And my name is Nun Natchanan Lingarunwong, and it's such an honor for me to be your MC for today. Well, it's been 3 years that we haven't met since the emergence of COVID-19. So today it's very exciting for me and the team to bring you to this remarkable event face-to-face, and I can guarantee you that today we have lots and lots of interesting information and also valuable experience for everyone joining in this event. So first of all, let me introduce to you today's activity. We're starting with the exhibition hall outside, which showcases an array of interesting booths from both diversified and startup companies. And apart from that, apart from the conference sessions that are going to be held here at the main stage, we also have a lot of interesting activities at all of main 5 vertical stages, which will feature in different themes. Namely, we have climate tech, deep tech, fintech DeFi, corporate innovation, and also metaverse and digital asset and NFT. So all stages would be ready to welcome those of you who are interested in exploring more and more. And also, if you would like to have further detail about our event, please just go to our TechSource Global Summit website, which is available for you to visit by simply scanning a QR code in the signage around the venue today. Or you can just have a look at the information board in front of each room. So don't forget, you can also share your moment at this remarkable event using the hashtag TSGS2022. All right, well, right now, apart from that, I would like to thank our sponsors and partners for their contribution and also their great support, which is crucial to us and for our event to happen as well. But before we begin the first session, let me just share with you a bit more on how to engage and interact with our speakers. You can ask some questions, or if you would like to share your opinion, please feel free to send them to our speakers by scanning QR code presented on the screen right now. And for example, if you are here with us at the main stage here, please just select main stage. And after that, you'll be able to type your comments, your question, and send them right away to our speakers. And also, please keep in mind that you can always change the room by tapping on the top, and you can see main stage, just select another stage, all right, where you want to move on to. So you can just send them, and your questions will be sent directly to our speakers on stage. And if the time allows, they will be discussed on the stage at the end of each session. So right now, I would like to begin with our first session for today. So what is the secret sauce of leading companies in the world like Tencent, Facebook, Spotify, or Airbnb to be lighting growth? So have you heard about Blitz Scaling? Yes, that's it, because today we are very much appreciated to have one of the authors of the bestseller publishing that will discuss that today with the topic related to the book, The Lightning Fast Path to Building Massively Valuable Companies to Learn. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to welcome Chris Ye, co-author of Blitz Scaling and co-founder of Blitz Scaling Academy.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here today. A huge thanks to the folk from TechSauce who have brought me here to Bangkok for the very first time to talk about Blitz Scaling. So thank you so much for making me feel so welcomed here. So let's talk about Blitz Scaling, and let's talk about why Blitz Scaling is so important. As you may have heard, I'm one of the co-authors of Blitz Scaling. The other co-author is my old friend Reid Hoffman, who is a very famous guy. You probably know of his many accomplishments. In addition to being the co-founder of LinkedIn, he was also one of the founding board members of PayPal, the first outside investor in Facebook, and the Series A lead investor in Airbnb. And a number of years ago, we decided to try to figure out how one person had been so successful. What was the common thread that allowed Reid to invest in or found companies that had generated almost $600 billion of value and counting? And what we concluded was there was a very special approach that had happened most often in Silicon Valley, but could be applied anywhere in the world. And that is Blitz Scaling. Now, as an author, one of the things you really learn to do is to make up a new word when you write a book. Because if you have a new word, then you can copyright it and make a lot more money. Now, in our case, the word we made up is Blitz Scaling, which we defined as the pursuit of rapid growth by prioritizing speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty. Now, I have spoken with audiences all over the world. And the first part is not very controversial. Everyone believes in growth. How many people here in the audience are entrepreneurs? Raise your hands. Yes, quite a number of entrepreneurs. How many people are investors? Great. How many of you entrepreneurs or investors want your companies to stagnate until they die? Yeah, no hands were raised for some strange reason. But prioritizing speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty, that actually sounds extremely risky. And it is. And the biggest risk is if you blitz scale, if you pursue this strategy and you are doing it in an unblitz scalable market, disaster can occur. So let's consider the example of WeWork. Did WeWork try to blitz scale? The answer is yes. They prioritized growth and speed over efficiency in the face of uncertainty. In fact, they raised and spent over $10 billion US building up their business. And yet, in the end, it was a mistake because the market they were in was not blitz scalable. In fact, the faster they grew, the quicker they lost money. And today, WeWork is worth less than $4 billion. Though apparently, if you found WeWork, even after losing $7 to $10 billion of investor money, you could still raise more money for your next startup. What an amazing industry this is. But I don't want you to be the next Adam Newman. I want you to be one of these successful blitz scalers, like a Brian Chesky of Airbnb or a Jeff Bezos of Amazon.com. And so what I'm going to explain today is when you should actually blitz scale. Now, the interesting thing about blitz scaling is it is a management philosophy that can be best summarized with the Will Ferrell movie Talladega Nights. In it, Ricky Bobby, a race car driver, has two key things that he always says. The first is that if you ain't first, you're last. And the second is, I want to go fast. And blitz scaling occurs and should be applied when you are in a Ricky Bobby market, in a winner-take-most market. And the way you can tell whether you're in a winner-take-most market is whether or not there are network effects. In other words, as the number of users or customers grows, does the value for each individual user or customer grow? Because if you have those kinds of network effects, as your company grows, the number of users, and as the value per user grows, then what you have is exponential value growth. That's how these companies become so valuable so quickly. But even more importantly, as they grow, as they increase in the network value they provide to each individual user, it becomes almost impossible for any competitor to catch up. Imagine if I created an exact copy of Airbnb. Everything about it was the same, except there were no apartments or houses listed on it. How valuable would that be? Not valuable at all. In fact, the value comes from the network, and that's what creates that winner-take-most market dynamic. The other thing you need is to have a scalable distribution strategy, some way of going to the market that allows you to grow faster than the competition. Because if you think about it, just like in the legend of Ricky Bobby, this is a race. And the question is, are you going to be able to outrace your competitors to reach critical scale and win that market? And there, what we're really looking for are things like virality, so that as you gain in customers, more customers naturally come in. or the ability to tap into existing distribution networks to be able to leverage the telephone phone book like we do with WhatsApp to grow more quickly. Now, the thing about blitz scaling is it doesn't excuse you from building a good business. It's not enough to just say, I am going to grow quickly. You have to also build a business that makes money. And that's why we still have these necessary elements of blitz scaling. You need a big market to take advantage and make billions of dollars. You need product market fit for sustainability over time. You need high gross margins because companies are intended to make money. And you need to have operational and organizational scalability so that your company can take full advantage. But these elements are insufficient, right? By themselves, they just describe a good business. It is those essential elements, the winner-take-most market and scalable distribution, that set these blitz scaling opportunities apart and tell you that this is the time to actually begin blitz scaling. Now, if you do start to blitz scale, then the key thing that will happen is your company will go through a predictable set of key transitions. These are challenges that every entrepreneur who blitz scales is going to face. Now, I do not have time, because we have a very short time for this presentation, to go over all of them. But what I will do is I will explain at least one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask people in the audience to raise their hands when I say the name of the key transition they would like me to explain. So I will read through all of them, and raise your hands for the one that you want to hear, and I will explain the one that has the most hands. I will also reassure you, every single one of these is in the book. If you miss out, you can always pick up the book and get a copy of it. So, how many people want to hear about the transition from small teams to large teams? Okay, good. I see a good smattering of hands out there. How about generalists to specialists? Aha, I see folks out there. Now, and you can vote for more than one if you want. Contributors to managers to executives? Okay, a few bold people. Dialogue to broadcasting? Inspiration to data? Ooh, people really like that one. Single focus to multi-threading? And finally, last but not least, pirate to navy. All right, so this is a close one. And I really love the fact that people like pirate to navy, but it really was the case that most people were interested in inspiration to data. So here's the thing about inspiration. You absolutely have to have it. If you are a startup and you're just launching your product, you have no data on which to base your decisions. And so you cannot A/B test your way to your first product. And the great entrepreneurs have the kind of inspiration that allow them to intuit what other people don't yet know. All of you probably have a smartphone in your pocket. Those of you who are a bit older will remember when not every phone looked exactly the same. In fact, phones looked very different and came in every different color and variety and shape. And Steve Jobs, when he introduced the iPhone, said, nope, everything you know about a telephone is wrong. From now on, a telephone is going to be a small black rectangle. Steve Jobs had no data to tell him this, but he had inspiration. However, many of you probably have an iPhone 13 or even an iPhone 14 coming out soon in your pockets. And rest assured, they don't just make those phones without actually using data. They have billions of users with trillions of data points that now help them figure out what the right thing to do is. So as your company grows, you need to transition from the initial inspiration that allows you to build that great product into leveraging the data that your success has provided to allow you to refine that product and make it stronger and stronger over time. Now, the other thing is the counterintuitive rules of blitz scaling. I've just explained to you how strange blitz scaling is. Prioritize speed over efficiency, take risks. That all sounds kind of counterintuitive. Well, if you're doing that, you're also going to need to follow a number of counterintuitive rules. And we'll do the same thing we did last time, which is to say, I'm going to read off each of these rules, and you guys will raise your hands, and whichever one is most popular is the one I'll explain. And again, the rest are all covered in the book. Now, I will admit that we wrote these to be controversial, to get people's attention. So don't let that fool you. There's a story behind each of them. How many people want to hear about embrace chaos? Okay, a couple of people embracing, but not that many. How about tolerate bad management? I got some people who are interested. I like that. Launch a product that embarrasses you? Yes, this seems a strange one. Let fires burn. Let fires burn. Okay, I got you. And I see some people who are voting for every single one, and that's okay, because if you are enthusiastic about it, you can find them all in the book. Do things that don't scale. Okay, good number there. Ignore your customers. Yes, very different from how we normally think about customers. Raise too much money. Okay, a few people, it doesn't seem to be as popular these days. It's a little harder to raise too much money. But don't worry, I'm going to talk about blitz scaling in a bear market as well. And finally, evolve your culture. All right, so I went through it again. It was relatively close, but it looked to me like ignore your customers actually won. And that's probably because we've all heard the customer is always right. And Amazon is a customer-centric company. And yet the thing about your customers is the customers you have today may not be the customers that are going to make you successful in the future. And what you need to do is you may sometimes need to ignore your current customers. Henry Ford famously said, if I talked to my customers, they would have told me I wanted a faster horse. You need to focus on what's going to build the long-term value. So when my co-author, Reid Hoffman, was creating LinkedIn and he launched the product, early on, there was a group of people who called themselves LinkedIn Open Networkers, or Lions. And what they said was, on LinkedIn, I will accept any LinkedIn request that someone sends me. And they felt like this is the way LinkedIn should be used. But that wasn't the way Reid intended LinkedIn to be used. He wanted it to be used as the default place for you to have your professional identity. And it meant that if somebody saw you were connected to someone on LinkedIn and they asked you about that person, he wanted you to be able to say, this is how I know that person and I can help you with an introduction. So even though the LinkedIn Open Networkers were the loudest, most enthusiastic users of LinkedIn, he chose to ignore them and the various products and features that they were requesting and focus instead on the future customers that were actually going to make LinkedIn valuable. So again, as I mentioned, all of these counterintuitive rules are available in the book. And if you happen to catch me later on during the conference, any questions you have, I'm happy to answer them. But some of you may also be from larger companies. Any folks here who are members of larger corporations, not just startups? All right, good. I see quite a number of sponsors and exhibitors. Now I want you to consider, do you think that blitz scaling is useful for an established company? Like imagine a company with about $11 billion US in revenue, 17,000 employees, and a $20 billion market cap. How much growth do you think is left in a company like that? It's pretty established, right? And yet, this company was Amazon in 2006, when it first introduced what would become Amazon Web Services. You see, blitz scaling is never done. When you're a company, even as one as successful as Amazon was to that point, the ability to create and scale new businesses is what makes companies lasting winners, is what allows them to dominate decade after decade after decade. And even if you're an existing company, one of the things you'll want to do is to focus on finding opportunities to blitz scale new businesses that will make your company and keep it successful. Now, obviously, things have changed a lot recently. At least in the United States, we've seen significant drops in the stock market. And the question is, Chris, you're talking about taking all these risks. What do we do in a bear market? Well, the first thing is you have to be adaptable. You have to learn to play in defense. Times have changed. Venture capitalists are investing less than before. Blitz scaling, however, remains relative and contextual. Remember, the goal is to move faster than the competition. It's not a specific percentage growth. So as long as you're moving faster than your competitors, you can still blitz scale. It's also contextual, because if it's harder for you to raise your money right now, it's also harder for all your competitors. And that means that everyone is going to be running the race more slowly. You also need to regularly evaluate and refine your investment thesis. The reason you started your company, the things that are going to make you successful, are they still true? Or have market circumstances changed things? You always have to refine your investment thesis. And if you are able to prove your investment thesis, your investors will also invest. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. The degree of difficulty is much higher. If before, when the market was going crazy, it was like the Olympic vaults in the 1920s, today it's like Olympic vaults today. Many more somersaults, much more work. But it's still possible to blitz scale. And in fact, it is actually a great opportunity, because you can change the challenges into opportunities. It's easier to win a race when there's fewer competitors. The best time to recruit great talent is when others aren't hiring. Anyone who's had to recruit during the boom times knows it was hard to get employees. Now you can find great ones. The least expensive time to build market share is during a recession. Right? This is the time where your marketing dollars will go further, where you can get more customers than your competitors. And a small lead now can compound into a big lead later on. If everyone's moving more slowly, it may look like you're not actually opening up that much distance. But once things begin to accelerate again, that small lead can become a much bigger lead. And you're constantly compounding, like the compound interest that helps us earn our retirement savings. So I'll leave you with this thought. You have to ask yourself, even though times are tough, what is easier now than it was before? And that is how you can successfully blitz scale in a bear market. Now, before I go, I'm going to mention two quick things. The first is, if you happen to catch me out there in the conference and you want to take a picture, a selfie, I will absolutely take a picture with anyone who asks, provided you use the hashtag TSGS2022 hashtag. So please come look for me out in the conference, and please feel free to take any pictures. The second is, if you've enjoyed this 15-minute appetizer on blitz scaling, I am going to be conducting a 2-day blitz scaling masterclass next week on the 30th and 31st right here in Bangkok. So if you're interested in that, you want to learn more, you can go to risexcel.com and look for the blitz scaling course there. Now, I have a very special treat for you guys for the rest of this time. Although he could not be here today, my co-author, Reid Hoffman, wanted to make sure that he could express his interest in what was going on here at TSGS Global Summit. So I'm going to leave the stage, and you're going to watch a recorded interview that Reid and I did along with the TSGS team. And we'll be talking about blitz scaling, we'll be talking about Southeast Asia, and I hope you guys enjoy it greatly. Again, I'm Chris Ye. You can find me online at Chris Ye, just about everywhere. Please come and find me elsewhere in the show. I'm happy to talk, happy to take photographs. And now, without further ado, my friend and co-author, Reid Hoffman. Well, I am so delighted to be able to introduce my co-author, my friend, the legendary Reid Hoffman. Reid, thank you so much for being willing to join us here at the TSGS Global Summit.
My absolute pleasure. You guys are doing great things, and you're visible from around the world.
Well, Reid, we'll certainly have to try to get you out here in a future year, but we're really glad to be able to have you here virtually. Let's just start with a question that is on everyone's mind. Public markets have fallen a lot in the past year, and an increasing number of venture rounds are flat or even down. Do you think we're in a funding winter? How long do you think it's going to take for markets to return to growth? And what should entrepreneurs do to make it through these challenging times?
Well, a set of excellent questions, Chris, both from you and from TSGS, who's thinking about this in a very good way. I think we absolutely are in a growth funding winter. And so I think that the question around growth financings, call it Series Cs, maybe some Series Bs, definitely kind of Series Ds, are no, we want to make absolutely certain that the companies that will be able to survive the winter will be there. And so funding will be cautious, will be expensive, will be slow. And so part of that is when you're thinking about these kind of growth rounds, you need to think about, okay, how do we preserve capital well? How do we start by playing defense? It's part of the reason why you're seeing a number of tech companies do, kind of refocusing, selective layoffs, other kinds of things as part of this. Now, that being said, I don't think that means that capital won't be available. I think that when you can articulate how do you get through a winter, a possibly indefinite winter, how can you very strongly get there? I think there is capital available. I think the capital will be expensive and slow, as I mentioned. And so you start by thinking about how do you play defense on the growth side, but then you shift to how do you play offense? How can you play a stronger game of getting the growth in your competitors? Because as you do so, that's one of the reasons why the companies that get through these kind of winters end up being the really strong companies that compound and get there. Now, the other thing I would say as part of this is that doesn't necessarily mean that it's funding winter for everything. Because you notice, Chris, because I speak very carefully on these things, I said a growth funding winter. I actually, in fact, think that if you can pull off a seed Series A, that's a good financing, still be careful on your cash and be getting there, you can also create a great competitive differentiation for, how essentially you can be there ready for growth financing when the markets begin to open back up. Again, you have to start by being cautious, but it's a great time to actually start a company, get an initial Series A. Now, for people who know the two of our works, Chris, one of the natural questions that will come from this is also, well, what about blitz scaling? Does blitz scaling still apply in times of financing? And the answer is yes, because it's competitive speed. It's not, like you say, okay, well, how do I still be the faster to scale, the first to scale in my market, the first to get to the new levels of peaks and milestones? And you still want to do that, but you understand that this is in a funding winter that has everyone, it's a blizzard that's attacking everyone on the growth side. How do you differentially move fast, move to scale? Starts by thinking defense, but then gets by playing offense. And that's, I think, the kind of overall frame to how to think about these kinds of funding markets.
And I think we've even seen an example recently. We talked a lot during the pandemic about what was going to happen. We, in fact, made predictions about how Airbnb was going to have to play defense, but then would be able to go on the offense against competitors like Hilton and Marriott. And in fact, all those predictions came true.
Yep. And it's exactly the Airbnb response to the pandemic. Now, the Airbnb business readjusted within a small number of months, and you can't necessarily predict that, but you reset early and strong. You focus on what your growth of your core fundamentals are. You get the entire company aligned on that. And then in that place, whether or not the market's fully recovered or not, investors will love you.
Now, Brian Chesky of Airbnb is just one of many great entrepreneurs you've worked with. You actually host the award-winning podcast, Masters of Scale, and you've interviewed many of the world's greatest entrepreneurs. What have these interviews taught you about what you see as the common traits of the most successful entrepreneurs?
So it's been my pleasure and honor and delight to interview folks that ranged from, Sheryl Sandberg and Miriam Nafisi to Reed Hastings, Brian Chesky, Satya Nadella, this whole kind of range of folks. And, there's a couple of things that are really key. One is, be always thinking originally about what you're doing. It's kind of first principles thinking, how you're doing. Be attentive to learning, right? So what are you learning? So you may have a very good theory of the case. You may have very good intuitions. You may have very good things, but learning constantly. Learning is not just from data, but also from talking to people around you and asking, kind of like, what's wrong with my theory? What's wrong with my case? What do I need to do? Personally, one of the things that I talk to Reed Hastings about all the time is I always bring theories like blitz scaling to him, because he will start with, well, no, you're wrong. And then we'll argue with you. And then by arguing, we'll make it much sharper, which is one of the reasons we had him as one of our very early guests in our Stanford course that we taught, which, led to the book and even the podcast in terms of what we were doing for all of blitz scaling. And then, I think the other one is culture and recruiting. Be very intentional about the culture that you're building, because the culture is what replicates, it's what sets. You have to do it very early. And then you want to be recruiting all of the best talent, not just into the company, obviously, and always upping your game. What are the new kinds of leaders and executives that can be cultural co-founders that are coming in, but also as financiers, as board members, as advocates. And that journey of establishing a very strong culture and then constantly recruiting across all fronts to share the mission. And this is one of the things that I had really learned from Jeff Weiner, the previous CEO of LinkedIn, Ryan Wislansky being the current CEO, who was being awesome. But Jeff would recruit people like Ryan, would recruit other folks into the company, not by saying, come work for me, but saying, come work for the mission. Come work for this transformation of the industry, of the world, of society that we are trying to do, and share that mission with me. And I think that portion of it is common across every great entrepreneur to scale.
Now, speaking of things that places have in common, we're here in Bangkok at the TechSauce Global Summit. And of course, you've traveled all over the world in your career. You've been to many different ecosystems. What do you think are the critical success factors that go into building a strong startup ecosystem in what we call developing countries or emerging markets?
Well, as you know, Chris, I've served on the Endeavor board for over 12 years. I try to work on entrepreneurship around the world. Part of the reason why we do this awesome events like TechSauce together. And so, some familiarity, even though obviously I'm very rooted in Silicon Valley, as are you. And the key thing is to have global ambitions, to not just think about it as competing in your local market, but how do you get to competing globally? How do you recruit global strength to enabling you? How do you go from one country to regional to global? That kind of think very big about what you're doing is super important. And by the way, in the age of the internet, it's totally capable. You have access to information. That's part of the reason why we write books like Blitz Scaling in order to facilitate that knowledge and playbook. You can recruit people as investors and advisors. You can recruit people to come and help your team. Talent. You have massive amounts of talent wherever you are in the world. You just need to learn and learn to run this intense race together. Now, of course, funding is harder when you're not in a place like Silicon Valley. It's much easier when you're in Silicon Valley. It's much easier when you're in China. You have to play that game more aggressively and smart, but it's not impossible. Take, for example, Toby Lutka of Shopify in Canada. It's kind of basically the city that was not on the map in any kind of tech thing, and still built it up by studying and learning what were the key things, and then reinventing them from first principles about which of those things will work in Ottawa, which of those things can we make work here by attacking a global market and doing. And I think that's part of what you have to do. And obviously, I understand that there's challenges in financing, challenges in infrastructure, challenges in other kinds of things. But the world is becoming more global, not just because of the cloud. And I think that's the way that you can play forward. And that ambition should be global in terms of what you're doing.
I mean, you're also involved in a lot of very futuristic kind of companies. I mean, this is some pretty serious stuff: autonomous vehicles, nuclear fusion, supersonic airliners, and of course, artificial intelligence. What's your vision for the future of technology over these next few decades? And what areas do you think are going to prove the most important?
Well, one of the things that's pretty amazing is if you look at previous decades of technology, it turns out that one of them was the most relevant one. It was like, it's mobile. It's transition to the cloud, it's consumer internet software. Part of what we're seeing is it's multiple now, and they're going to be interacting. So personally, having recently co-founded Inflection Labs with Mustafa Suleyman, I obviously think artificial intelligence, large language models, foundational models are going to be really important and magical. But then you're going to be in to combine those with ongoing revolutions in the cloud and in mobile, but also, of course, synthetic biology, and also, of course, quantum computing, also, of course, augmented and virtual reality, also, of course, applications of artificial intelligence like autonomous vehicles, also, of course, reinvention of transport and logistics like Joby and, flying cars. And we're going to see all of this, kind of going forward. And so I think it's super important. And I've also, of course, invested, as you know from the question, in supersonic airlines like Boom, nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, because it's going to be very important for climate. So I think the answer, and by the way, you say, well, what does artificial intelligence have to do with fusion? Well, so actually, in fact, if you're modeling the containment the right way, artificial intelligence might actually be able to help you solve the containment problems, which then allow you to make fusion work. So that's, even those things kind of see unexpected crossovers, which, for the geeks among us, is how do you model a torus around a helium based chain that can contain the energy and bring it out, and how do you make all that work? That might be an artificial intelligence modeling problem. Maybe we'll see, but there's super interesting things. And so I think if you said pick one, I'd say what's going on in artificial intelligence, but I would say you'd be foolish to pick one. That there are multiple strains, multiple massive threads of technology that are going to make a very big difference for the world in the next 10 years.
Well, it sounds like it's an exciting time to be alive, and especially an exciting time to be an entrepreneur.
100%. And as you know, Chris, part of the reason why you've dedicated your life where you have and where we've dedicated our lives together is entrepreneurs are part of how you build the future. It isn't just the products and services, but the industries, the jobs, the transformations of society. And in volatile times like pandemics and wars and market things, those create more turbulence. That's precisely where entrepreneurs need to step forward and build the new companies, the new products, the new services.
Now, Reid, obviously you've devoted your life to entrepreneurship, but let's take a look at the proverbial road not taken. If you hadn't gone into business, what do you think you'd be doing today?
Well, if I hadn't gone into business being very broad, I'd probably be operating as an academic, maybe a public intellectual and a philosopher. And I'd probably be doing things like writing books on friendship, which is part of the reason I gave the commencement speech to Vanderbilt University earlier this year on friendship. It was a kind of a nod to that road not taken, but also kind of commencement speeches are these things where you kind of try to give a gift from your own personal experience to the next generation that's coming up. And, part of what success for all of us means is how do we hand a better world and a better set of tools to the next generation to carry it past us and make an even better world, because that's how we make progress as a society. That's how we make progress as humanity. And who knows, maybe I would have found my way into, philosophizing about entrepreneurship, which, you and I do a little bit together, Chris, but I think that's probably where I would be if I hadn't ended up being a technology entrepreneur and an investor.
Fantastic, Reid. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. On behalf of TechSauce and the audience here at the Global Summit, huge thanks for being here, and we appreciate all the time you've taken to share your wisdom.
And I hope to come visit at some point in the future. And, a thank you to everyone in the audience, because, how do we build the future? That's what matters.
Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Chris and Reid Hoffman, for sharing with us and also for making this session a fantastic talk indeed.